Hey, welcome back, guys. This is Jason, KM4ACK. Today, I wanted to take a few minutes and talk to you about communicating with non-hams during an emergency. Stick around, and we'll get right to it. Real quick before we get going today, I've got to give a shout out to these guys. They're my latest patrons over on Patreon. If you'd like to help support the channel, I'll leave a link to Patreon down in the description below. So in the unfortunate event that you find yourself in a disaster situation where traditional communications have been taken out, you might want to communicate with someone other than another ham radio operator. So today I wanted to take a few minutes and discuss how we might accomplish that and some of the pros and cons of each of these solutions. So I wanted to start with APRS because it's pretty much the cheapest and easiest solution to get up and running. It doesn't take a whole lot of training before you can start sending out messages to non-ham radio operators. Now, you can use a radio like the Yaesu FT3DR, or maybe it's the Yaesu Mobile, the FT400 XDR, I think it is. Or you can actually use an HT that's not an APRS radio at all, provided you couple that with something like a Mobilinked TNC and an Android phone running APRS Droid. So there's a lot of different ways that you can get into it, but it's pretty inexpensive in comparison to other solutions. But we can use the APRS system to send first text messages to any cellular phone, so even if someone's not a ham, you could get a message out to them. And you can use the APRS system to also send out emails. Now, I've done some videos on several of these things that I'm going to discuss in the past, and I'll leave a link to those down in the description below. Concerning APRS and using it to communicate with non-hams, like I said earlier, relatively inexpensive to get into, so it doesn't cost us a fortune up front. Most of the systems are fairly lightweight and portable, so that makes it good during an emergency. However, there are some downsides to trying to use APRS in a disaster situation. One of the caveats to the system is you've got to be able to get into an APRS digipeater that still has an internet connection. A lot of people don't realize this, but once your APRS message hits your local digipeater, more times than not, that message is injected into the internet, into the APRS system, where it travels over the internet to another digipeater where it's broadcast back out over RF. So in my area of the country, let's say we got hit by a tornado, well, I might not have communications locally, but very close to me there is probably a APRS digipeater that wasn't affected by the storm damage. In that case, I can hit that digi and get that message in and out. However, in a larger scale disaster area, such as maybe an earthquake or a hurricane, you might not be able to hit an APRS digipeater. Or maybe the digi is still online, but it's not connected to the internet. In either case, you're not going to be able to get your message to go out. So we're limited with basically simplex range when it comes to using APRS. So you need to keep those things in mind when trying to figure out what's the best solution for your particular situation. Now, moving on from APRS, we could also use a handheld with a Raspberry Pi or another type computer to send packet message or packet WinLink messages. With WinLink, we're able to send not only email messages, as you would traditionally think of, but we can also utilize text messages going to a regular mobile device. So that's another great way to communicate with somebody that's not a ham radio operator. Again, when we're talking about WinLink packet, we're also limited to simplex range. So if you don't have a gateway in your area that is within simplex range, or if that gateway doesn't have a connection to the internet, that would also keep you from getting a message out. In that case, we're going to have to look for another solution. At this point, we're probably going to have to move to HF. Now, there's a lot of advantages to going HF, the main one being we can reach out further distances. The big downside with HF is the cost of the equipment, the size of the equipment. Usually our setups are going to be larger, our antennas are going to be larger, and all of it's going to cost more and take more training to become familiar with, or at least more practice. So those are some of the downsides to moving to an HF system. However, we're no longer limited by that simplex range. So if we want to use WinLink, even if we're in a widespread disaster area such as a hurricane, we can reach out, 700, 800, 900 miles without any trouble whatsoever and pass those WinLink messages along. As long as we can connect to a gateway that still has its internet connection, we can get that message to a non-amateur radio operator. Now, if you've been around the channel for any length of time, you'll know that I absolutely love JS8 Call. It's probably one of my favorite digital modes to go out and work. And it has a lot of great features when it comes to emergency communications. One of the features that it has is the ability to send a message if it's formatted properly. Send that message, it's heard by the receiving station, decoded, and then injected into the internet. And we're using the APRS system here again. But JS8 Call can receive that message, translate it to the APRS packet, and then inject that information into the internet for delivery. So that gives us a lot of capability to get message out of a local disaster area and reach out quite a long ways. Another real great feature of JS8 Call is it's a weak signal communications mode, which means often we can use lower power than we might need with some other type of comms. Now, as much as I love JS8 Call, when it comes to sending out APRS messages and email, there is a huge, huge drawback. Maybe one of these days this will be addressed, but right now it's the way it is. JS8 Call only has the ability for one-way messages when we're talking about APRS type messages. So I can send a message through JS8 Call, it be received and delivered, say, to a cellular device. However, if that person tries to respond to that message, well, I never see that reply. The messages are only one way, and well, that's just the way it is. So with WinLink and regular APRS, we've got bidirectional communications. But when it comes to JS8 Call, it's a one-way street. So it might be the only thing that is available to be used. Maybe you not having any luck hitting a APRS digipeater or a WinLink gateway. JS8 Call is relatively easy to use, and another advantage of it is I can send that message out one time. I don't have to try to connect to a particular station. Any station that's on the air that hears that and has an internet connection will go ahead and pick that up and inject that into the APRS system. So you kind of have to look at which method you think might work best for you. In my case, I like to have all of them available. If the easiest one fails to work, well, then I'll move on to the next one in the toolbox. Anyway, there's a look at several different systems that you can use to communicate with people that aren't hams. And again, I'll leave links to other videos that I've done with more detail about how each of these processes work. We'll see you guys on the next video. Until then, 7-3. And we'll wait for the airplane to go by. Maybe they're not going to fly in circles today. And now we got a helicopter going by right overhead.